Again, for recording's sake, we'll call this transmission 2. It's June 5th, 2016, about 2:50 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. And I'm speaking with Og Tellez. And this is a follow-up based off of our... So let's just move into the questions. Are you good to go on that?
Okay.
Part 2 here, going into it. So we left off at going through 1 and 2 of the unveiling, and so the natural kind of lead-in is part 3 of the unveiling. You want to talk about, what that's going to be, what we can expect to see rolled out. Your thoughts on that topic?
I'll say a lot. So the unveiling is a process of merging the conscious and subconscious and all that I was talking about with the trauma. And it's very intense and basically almost cathartic in a painful but healing way. And so that's going to have to basically be along the lines towards the planetary healing that we're going to experience. Phase 3 is essentially all of that, as well as what you could kind of call the ultimate truth about our existence and our reality. Whereas phase 1 is the kind of nefarious activity that's been going on the underground bases with the cloning. And I kind of also want to bring up the celebrity cloning, because there's just a lot of information coming to that. And on their own behalf, they want attention to it. They want people to know. Aside from that, we can't really say much, because it's like, well, who wants what and who's in power and control? And not many people really understand that. But the idea is, if there's more information, there's more public awareness of this, that's where we're going to see change happen. And so there are a lot of celebrities in the cloning situation where they're not being held against their will. I can't say that, but it's not an agreeable situation, and there's all these contracts and requirements and things like that. So I want to make that an effort, at least in people's minds, something to think about. But
and that information goes along with the first part of the unveiling, as far as the secret projects and cloning and things like that, correct?
Yeah, so that was 1, and then 2, so celebrity cloning, and then the technology that is required for that is 1. Then 2 is the rest of the technology and how that technology changed our world. You could call it the history, but it's actually the fabric of time and space itself that has been altered. And then from there, phase 3 is basically, I don't like to use the word for the idea denoted, but the pinnacle of all of that, which is that what situation we're in and the bounds of our universe and how all this works is part of the unveiling, and it's very much internal as much as it is external. And it has to do with the plane we're on, and whether it's a ball or space is physically empty, so to speak, or whether it's more hyperspace with hyperspatial realms, and then into extraterrestrial contact, and whether they're walking around entities, or whether they're more spiritual or even angelic or demonic. And coming together of all this knowledge that humanity's been holding, but as well kind of been manipulated through. So it's a big deal. It's almost like, and it's not a deal because that's another word, but it's almost like it's a coming to age of humanity, where they start to learn about the world and life. And as a child, we're kind of self-centered, and I don't mean that in the bad way, where a lot of people believe that children aren't worth much to a society because they're just having fun being self-centered. But I mean in the sense that we're learning about ourselves before we can comprehend other people's positions in the world and all those things. Humanity at large is doing that and figuring out what's on top of the kitchen counter, and where everything belongs and how it all works.
And so when you're talking about the process of that kind of third part of the unveiling being a coming of age, what it reminds me of is a lot of different kind of tribal rituals and things like that for coming of age ceremonies. And essentially, a lot of them are initiated through some type of process that's not so easy, whether it's scarification, whether it's doing a vision quest where you're out on your own, but it brings up a lot of transformative breaking through the veils processes in order to kind of transition from one maturity into the next. And is that a decent metaphor to kind of describe that third party unveiling?
Yeah, it goes to that degree, and it goes beyond that. Everything that relates to the whole world is tied into this. So tribal existence has its place,
Of course.
and a lot of these societies will work with a type of initiation process, and it's what it's all about, really. The basic idea of that is that fear can't be allowed to gain control over the whole, of the self or the being. And that through that negation of fear, which is like a foreign entity trying to come over, the person can really find their own power within and overcome anything at that point, because it's no longer based upon what's external, but it's based upon what's happening within, and that person has control over that now. But then it goes into all these different areas and how it could be coming down to changing people through this, and the transhumanist agenda comes up, and different occultic religions or even mainstream religions, and how those events kind of warp the human consciousness and the personality into being something else. And we are pretty much in danger of seeing that on the mass scale, because that's what we've already seen. That's how we got to this point. So but with awareness, though, things lean back towards those who know and those who are capable of, which is, there's a lot of people will simply not take control, but they'll come into position. And I can't really describe what's going to happen. It's not like I know, although I've seen things, but anybody who just watches and sees what's happening knows what's going to happen. And so it's just about how we're going to learn from everything. And I don't like using their metaphors, which is that the phoenix has to rise from the ashes, because that's all about destruction and creation in order out of chaos, which is not what this is really about. That's what's been pulled over people's heads, basically, to make that initiation into a true connected existence so harsh and strong that it becomes a programming event, and the sacrifice of that humanity and into something transhumanist or hive-minded or cultic. And so it's weird. It's like it leans to both ways, where people that are ready for that will experience that coming to age, and the people that see this and don't understand are just going to think, basically, the fear will be there.
Can you tell me, as far as this unveiling, you broke it down into 3 different parts. Is this an agenda that's being put forth by, kind of the higher ups here, or is this a natural agenda kind of unfolding? And are these 3 parts part of other whistleblowers that are also on the same kind of page as far as ushering these sections in a timely fashion?
Yes, it's natural and it's planned. It's basically, if you want to look at it in a not skeptical, but like, I'm trying for words here. Basically, to make sure we're not being in a vulnerable position and we're not being cheated or whatever. I'm not doing well with the words, but that it's they say, and we can basically guess, but we don't really know for sure, that something is going to happen anyway. We know something's going to happen, but there's going to be this great shift that has been talked about forever. At least, we call that forever, but it's been only a few years. And so then this is how they're helping themselves, by helping humanity transition into that age, because without that, they won't exist either. And so it's also that there's been certain factions parasiting off humanity to the degree where it's, again, almost like this Mexican standoff position, with those that are basically infected, and then those that are neutral, and those that want to help, and the people that are there. And it gets really complex, because you got to imagine, if people have enough money and power to start manipulating time and space, and there's all these different conflicting goals. So this is basically the point where it all wraps up, because we've been in extended time where the control system has been dragging out situations, delaying releases, basically creating history year after year, decade after decade, just when in reality, everything could have been changed already a long time ago.
Definitely.
And so that's coming to like a point, a finite point where it can't continue. As a result of that, people will wake up and see what's been swept under the carpet, what's been hid behind the veil, and then that's the cosmic awakening. So it's like, it's not necessarily connected, although it is, because that's just how time works. they've been delaying it so long that by the time they reverse that, it's going to force people into a spontaneous cosmic awakening.
Just leave them right
so
there.
in the same sense, if they don't allow it and they keep going on, they just run out of basically like code. And at that point, whatever they're trying to grasp onto just slips from their hands. And they know that's the other version of that. And all they can do is basically paint a picture of something better, or get people to completely turn against themselves, which is what people have been doing this whole time. But within that, coming to not age yet, but coming to the hardest, most difficult part of our existence, where we're looking death in the face, that's when you're going to see humanity basically go through that shift and that change. We're already hinting at it, but everybody's looking down. I mean, think about it. Me and you, two generally normal people, I mean, maybe normal conversation about change in the world. And right now there's radioactive waste spilling into our water, into the ecosystems, and it's not going to go anywhere for thousands of years. Think about this. We're talking about our existence here, and we're in a world where we're two guys out of however many hundreds of millions talking about it, and you know, we're not alone in that, but there's not many people doing it. So right there is kind of absurd, but maybe we just realized and looked around and saw these things, and when others do it, the same type of process will happen. You know, there's thoughts about simulacra and created beings and soulless beings and things like that, but really don't need to get into that at this point. But so that's how it's kind of connected, intimately connected, and in the same sense, it's kind of on themselves to help this transition as well. It's already going to happen anyway. The only connection they really have is that they've been delaying it for so long that now it's actually coming down to the point, I guess, here. Where it can't go on any further.
So to kind of try to feed back a really complex kind of synopsis there, and you know, I get where you're trying to kind of tie in so many variables into, you know, a simpler question. So I'm just going to kind of feed it back to you again based off of what I'm hearing. The idea of this unveiling is both a natural plan and also a formulated plan. And the natural kind of part of it is that this is a river of time. This is naturally kind of leading up to this. It has to do with our own free will. It has to do with what we've done to this planet. It has to do with what we've done to each other. And so this is naturally kind of created this heading of where this river is going. And the powers that be, or the people that are aware of this, and the multi different factions that are involved in controlling or trying to control this river, are breaking this down into, well, one faction is breaking it down into three parts of this unveiling to try to get this information out to wake up the people, because right now it's coming up to a head. It's been delayed for so long that we are literally coming up to a wall that we either have to break through or we're going to kind of smash against. And then within that same kind of timeline in that river, there are multiple different factions looking at the variables that are happening right now and trying to manipulate them for their own agenda, trying to, you know, precog in the future, you know, look at different alternate timeline scenarios to kind of plan against certain things. But naturally, we're just kind of flowing along in this river, and the unveiling is inevitable at this point. This is going to happen inevitably.
Yes, I can agree with that.
Awesome. So that makes a lot of sense there. And so just to kind of wrap up on that topic, the third part of the unveiling is very much, as I'm hearing it from you, the big wake up. This is, you know, essentially the parts previous to this. This is the nuts and bolts part, and I very much relate with you around the inward journey and then outward journey. It's very much what I built the FDN whole movement around, and so that totally connects with me. And the idea of the first two parts being around nuts and bolts information of what has happened, where things are going, you know, the projects that have gone on, the different types of interventions between ET species and things like that. That's more of kind of the outward information where we're educating ourselves. We're all kind of waking up to that, okay, history book of really what the fuck has happened and what's gone down. And then that third part is the accountability part, where we really transition through a level of, sacred right into that understanding and grounding that understanding, and really the accountability of what all of that knowledge does to us as a community really starts to ground itself into us physically and in this realm. And it's from that baseboard we can then kind of relaunch into a new. Is that line up with your vibe at all?
Yeah, it's multidimensional. It's not going to be one event or one group anywhere. It's this pushing and ebbing and flowing of people feeling what they're going to be feeling naturally, and then learning how to, like you say a lot, digest it and actually build and produce and, create out of that, well, not really a breakdown, but what is going to be then synonymous with basically is the breakdown of this system now, which is deceptive based, and the things that we do provide no meaning.
Yeah.
We, anything, even so a lot of stuff anybody could be doing, whether you're in an office or doing labor work. A lot of it is just redundant stuff and then on top of that, we're like poisoning the environment and destroying things. So that's dissolving, and in that we're learning how to deal with what's left when all that's dissolved, which is honestly a cosmic challenge in itself. That's the big kicker, that we think this is hard, and it is, but it's only because we're ignoring the self. So then we have to get out of this and then realize what it means about the self, that we were in this for so long, that we were doing this.
And so when we get into that concept, the idea that we've been doing this for so long, we've been subservient to, gods, to religions, to governments, turning over our control and accountability, what group, essentially was served by this? When you talk about the ideas of us being an energetic food for maybe even multidimensional entities and things like that, what group essentially was keeping us in this cage here and using us in that level of where we do get up and we do the same mundane activities, we exist in an existence of the same activities, whether they're played out, as you said, as a janitor or as a construction worker or whatever they are. What group did that serve for so long?
Technically, earlier on, that could serve to help everyone, but in the way it was constructed, it was basically like a filtration system where jobs were invented, societies, cultural systems were invented, not all of them in the variety, but the neo-cultural systems we have now that are based upon inventions of inventions, they don't kind of tie in. I look for a specific person or family that benefits from it, and technically certain people benefit from the fact that people aren't doing the work that they need to be doing.
Exactly.
So in that way, no one really benefits from those actions. Although the highest form of benefit is that it's benefiting some type of plane or realm or group of people in a realm, possibly the temporal realm that is being accessed through technology by wealthy individuals and families, and that the lower vibrational energy that is created from people doing what they don't want to be doing, that doesn't actually serve anything, it serves that purpose in itself of lowering their vibrational energy. And I'm not too sure how it all adds up, but it could be that it could be something as complicated yet as simple as generators set up that pull energy from people on the lower scale to the degree where they make happy generators, if you will. And that's just, an illusory word. Happiness is a choice and perspective. And so, they put happy ones, and then, okay, well, in 15 minutes, everybody got happy, fed the machines fed back into them, and okay, now there's no control system, it doesn't work. So they put negative ones, and they keep buffering against each other. People get happy, the machines feed negativity and start a cycle, and people go back down. People naturally want to go up, so it's like a beach wave-based generator system for electricity. We keep bobbing up and down, trying to go up while these push us down. And so then imagine, and I'm just extrapolating here, but imagine that these generators then are creating a temporal dimension where these wealthy individuals can access using technology and basically live out on as if it were a plane, a mental plane. And it's literally at that point feeding off of the suffering of others.
Exactly.
In the most simplest Lego block form of it, that's kind of what it is. It's not personal. They're not going to come, maybe even apologize, but they're not going to sit there and say they picked it, each individual person and did it for a reason against them. But in that way, it's technologically and spiritually feeding off of the suffering of people that are trapped in a system because they can't imagine anything differently because they've been conditioned to think that way.
It's factory farming.
Yeah, exactly. Where they're doing what they don't want to be doing, and they're confined to a reality and an environment that is much more limited than the real original reality. And it might be, when people call it a planet, well, it might be that we were in a type of cosmic eternal state, and when all this really got the ball rolling, it mutated our DNA to the degree where now we're living out what was once sometimes a nightmare and a bad daydream, and now it's condensed into worlds and realms and cities where we're basically living out paper lives that feed a machine that is inhuman, and we forget about the self. It's like a trap system.
So where, as we talk about that and the idea of it being a factory farm for fear and lower vibrational energy that's feeding another, where is the mirror there for the way that we process meat and we process other animals and process other lives in the same way, that they are literally just feeding us on a sustenance level where we have, no care for their actual, life or their emotional state or any type of their being. How are we on this plane kind of mirroring that through the way that we go through our daily lives with what we ingest for sustenance?
Right, and everything about a person's existence in the material world, the very, like living city life, it's pretty much the most harmful thing you could imagine for the environment or the person themselves, from the air to the noise pollution, even to the, the water quality, to if they don't eat healthy, then just the products and the oil being burned constantly. It's almost like a disease. And so if we live in a way that negates our own being and our own connection to nature, at that point we have no right to demand, our own sovereignty over what's being done to us if somebody's doing the same thing to us that we're doing to the world. It's not necessarily like we're kicking the world, in her knee, and now somebody's doing that. It's the degree that we're painting our reality so heavily within this control system that people won't even comprehend when they're then being used in the same way for the same control system because they think that's reality.
And essentially, we're giving consent by contributing to this reality and going through the day by day on that.
Right, we won't even notice it, but then in the, kick me, I kick you thing, it's termed as consent. Yep. That when we take what we're being handed, when in first we should examine what it is and who's handing it to us, and if it doesn't resonate, walk in the other direction. People are accepting that handout, and in a way, in all ways, that's one, if you just get something, it's you're allowing it into your temple and your life. But two, if you pay for it, you're paying for things with money that is marked and symbolized and stamped and sealed. Is like a contract. Money is a contract. So entering into somebody with a contract saying, I'll take this product, here's my permission for you to give me the product. In a way, we don't know if we're buying something and then there's another deal on the other end where they're saying, well, you paid for this. This was the fine print. You bought this. Well, now you get this spiritual effect. And now you get this, otherwise effect. Or now you get put into this category where we can do this to you, or you can be brought up into this plan now. And there's all these plans. All of this is recorded, and it's like a big bloodline reality grid for the world that the control system is based on, at least for the parts that are heavily in operation.
And that brings up just a thought. For years now, the way that I've viewed money is I have to I've had to go through daily life having to use it and essentially provide in certain levels for parts of my family and my existence here. But I have tried to transmute as much as possible the idea of a physical currency and understanding that this represents energy. And so every time I go out and I distribute some of that energy in places, that's where I look at is where I'm literally delivering energy into this vessel, or I'm delivering energy into this direction or to this person. And to me, that ties in so much into the accountability of where that energy goes. When you look at the, kind of like the natural foods movement and, the even into like fair trade and all of these things that are, trendy topics and corporations use them and abuse them. But essentially at the core of them is the meaning of really understanding where your money is applied and where you give consent to the actions that happen in each day behind the things that you consume. And so in that dialogue that you were just talking about around that very much connects with my perception around, energy being this money. And it does make sense. What is on the other end of it? When you do kind of submit with a contract, literally on paper with, alchemical seals to an extent, where is that kind of turning it over into an energetic field and on other levels? Where are you giving consent?
Exactly, and it's kind of like a marking process. And especially how you said, look behind to the larger reality. What are they doing with the money? What are you helping them pay for in their time, in the whole scheme of things? Because that's what's really happening. It's not just a transaction. It's not just object. It's an energy. And you can look at it like a spiritual realm, say this is the spiritual, just transfer it over and, see if it works, if it's like a dream time. If it were energy and you go up to the store and then you pull energy from your heart and your mind and form this shape, this gift, and you gift it to the cashier or the owner of the store, whatever it is, well, that means that a piece of you is left with them for whatever exchange they gave to you. Mm-hmm. So if we look at money and energy in the same way like that, what we pay with our attention and what we pay with our money is actually becoming our world. It's what we're allowing into our world.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. I'm glad we got to talk about that, because that's definitely something that I feel, on a daily level. And, we can sit here and wax and wane on the different things that are going on all different types of realities and consciousness. But really what it comes down to in a lot of ways for people right now is understanding the day-to-day things that we are doing that are metaphors for larger things in life and larger things in consciousness. And I think that a lot of people get wrapped up in the drama and the excitement of new released information or insider information or whistleblower information, but really the context of bringing it back in to yourself and your journey is understanding your accountability into this world. And so shedding light on any type of these things, Og, for people, I think is incredibly beneficial right now to the whole.
Yeah, and that's how it is. You brought up a good word with that they're metaphors, and maybe not the end, but the whole idea is that it's literally like a form of magic. Mm-hmm. It's a form of mental, physical control. It's a spiritual system.
Absolutely.
Even the corporations are corpses. They're dead bodies. They're dead vessels that hold living souls. The polls and elections and police, if you vote, it's giving your permission away to be owned and ruled. It's not saying, I want this to happen because this guy represents what I think. It's saying, here's my tag and ticket, you now own me. And it's just an agreement, just the agreement of saying to someone, I agree with you. I want to put you in power over me. Saying that to a system is giving it spiritual power. And material power. It's written down then that this person did that, now we can do this to them. It's all written down. It's all very real. It's not people guessing over this stuff. It's a system that is allowed because it's a spiritual system that's set up. Now, whether that leads into who gains to go back before, and it's other races or demigods or whatever, it could be, but the important part is to know what we're looking at right here and now.
Exactly. Absolutely. Definitely, and I resonate with that completely. It's important to understand our history, and it's important to understand, where we actually came from in order to kind of move forward. But from my perspective, that history is just so messed up. It's just so messed up as far as who's viewing it, what faction is giving what information. It's nearly impossible, I feel like for anyone to discern on the outside, this linear information as far as fact, that again, that it's one of those places that you've got to go inside, you've got to kind of get in touch with your own records, your own cellular memory, going deeper into Akashic records and really kind of honing those senses within yourself to then start understanding that history. And within that idea is the understanding of being present here in this moment and being accountable here in this moment for yourself and for the whole, and as we move forward and you start to kind of educate yourself and understand on a level your actions in a daily place contribute, that's when you can start making minor adjustments. That's when your consciousness starts kicking in with triggers when you're out and you're buying things, where then you may just start looking at money as energy instead, or you may have some type of different, experience based off of, those little victories that you make in your life to change these things and upgrade your consciousness on a small level. I think the biggest thing I hear from people in general is, they're so overwhelmed with where to even start. Like, most people are locked into these jobs and to an idea of their livelihood, their children's livelihood, their families, and what they go to first is they think, if I stop doing this, everything is going to collapse, I'm going to end up on the streets, all of these things, and where it comes down to is doing the small adjustments and taking small victories, and those small victories are in the long run what will turn into a massive victory for the whole, because it is not something that we can just kind of unplug in this moment. This dream that we've all been dreaming together is a deep one, and we're all connected to it, and it will take small adjustments within that dream for us to start dreaming ourselves out of this existence and into a new kind of paradigm.
Yep, and a lot of it is the brain. People talk about the holographic matrix and all these control systems. A lot of it is coded into the brain as part of how people say that we've been evolved or modified on a genetic level. It's that the way the brain works is that it's kept in an imbalanced, dualized society. It's kept in one side or the other versus and that keeps a binary consciousness where all of the sides aren't active at once. You can kind of look at the trinary brain as the limbic, reptilian, and neocortex system, where we're connected to feelings and higher thoughts as well as lower feelings and instinct. And, you don't really see a lot of people activating in all three at once. You see one or the other or the other. And the key to that might be in the smaller parts of the brain, the hypothalamus, which transfers signals up to the higher and lower, basically lets it out of the lower if it's deemed as important. And depending on certain things, the hippocampus dealing with memory and certain perceptual and memory ties. And then an important one is the reticular activating system, which is basically, if in psychology it's described that they do it a lot, little experiments or demonstrations where if there's a party or something and you hear, a crowd of 30 people just murmuring together all in one big voice, and out of that somebody says your name. Well, out of the blue, that person normally, or stands up and looks over in that direction, even if you weren't paying attention. And that's because the reticular activating system is designed, and that's a funny way to put it, but it will filter. It's like a background processor application software running and listening through all the noise, and whatever comes out of that has been filtered to that specifically relates to whatever information is deemed relative to that particular brain. And so that system is on right now, and we're ignoring everything that's basically calling our name for the truth and telling us what to be focused on. It's replaced, and that's what's conditioned from birth, basically, to only look for more material, feeds of information, and ultimately it's that which identifies with the false ego. That which and it's funny I use the name, but that's kind of like a metaphor here. It's that which we perceive as identifying with the paper individual, which exists in this physical construct and is basically 100% a part of the physical matrix system construct that's attached to an identity and a particular career and a particular history that identifies with basically certain differences between what we think we are and what we think we aren't, that may or may not be built on cultural programming or fear-based, experiences and trauma, locking us into what we think we can't go beyond. And so that system has been abused and twisted up to the degree where it doesn't fully activate if we're connected into seeing ourselves on this material plane and identifying with that form of consciousness. It's very, very much psychological. And that's where it comes into every moment and every day. If there's some, it's weird because people get on vibes. It's difficult. People get on vibes and they're on a diet. They're working out. They're doing something in a hobby with this, and then it goes away, and they don't feel the motivation to do that anymore. So how do you find the motivation to continue to look into reality and break free from a system that is it's literally everywhere now? It's not going to be through a fad or a trend or one. What happens is when somebody's doing a fad or something out of habit or anything like that, it's one of the systems active and the other systems aren't checking it and keeping it in place and going, well, that situation, that action, that addiction, that habit, it doesn't feed the whole, that identity or that emotional response, whatever it is. And normally awareness rises up and we'll feel suffering and trauma and go, well, I don't want to do that. I don't feel like that. Now we're conditioned to go every day. I don't want to do that. I don't want to do that. And just continue doing it and do stuff we don't want to do. So that whole system gets twisted around until we're attached to this false persona. Literally, like they showed us, in these base situations that you can create controlled insanity. And in that, the personality breaks and fractures. It's as if that's what happened on a mass scale, and the personalities that belong to this identity are actually fractured away from the whole and the real original personality that's within us. So that then comes down to why people create these endless motions where they're not finding the way out, but they keep looking for more and more outside, activities. And, there's been tons of self-help and introspective and all this types of stuff, talking about this, but it really comes down to that system, to the degree where people, ultimately will go through a kind of a cosmic awakening. And it's because that false ego, that's the ego that dies. That's the one that fears death. The true self doesn't fear it. It doesn't fear anything. And so imagine as this system dissolves, but people aren't yet getting letting go of that false ego, it would be as if they're going into the eye of death at that point. Whereas the other person that can basically just have to let go of the illusion, people like that, they can transition into what's really here and what's really here to be known. And that's literally when the brain is activating and it's being controlled more by a spirit within, instead of all these external programs and influences where we have like a quota of negative energy to make based upon insecurities or where we got to go and do things to feed that identity. And when that happens, then DNA changes, then genetic memory comes out, then people start to notice higher phenomena and I don't want to say telepathy, but people become connected on a spiritual level to the degree where all these mythological forms of awareness and experience, almost like a dream time, becomes much more relevant. And it's strange because then we have to merge what we've been doing here with a reality that fits, that has all these aspects of a true human being. And it's not really, it doesn't have to go farther beyond that. There doesn't actually have to be any destruction or anything further than that. And I'm pretty sure there's safeguards in effect to the degree where, huge destruction won't take place in the way that people would think. And the only thing I can say is that there might be earth changes coming to the degree where if people themselves aren't taking that wake-up call, that the earth is basically instigating it and giving some type of catalyst, like a crystal growth point for change, so that we can it's almost like the earth always acts as a ground base for change. And so say the earth initiates those forms of change and it's coinciding with the system dissolving, which is coinciding with people waking up, it would be as if the earth is waking us up.
And so, within that thought there, the earth, to me, when you're talking about that, the earth is in a symbiotic relationships with the people that inhabit it. And so naturally, it's going to react in those places on an energetic field, on a field of consciousness where it can feel that. And from, just kind of listening to your breakdown of what's happening here between kind of the false ego and higher self, the way that I see it is almost kind of like this infinite feedback loop that bounces between the higher self and this false ego that we're stuck in and that we've been trapped in. And it also kind of brings up this consciousness that not only is that part of every individual's experience, but is part of the collective whole right now in the experience. And we're trying to kind of break through that feedback loop. We're trying to kind of get out of that infinite place that it's been in and kind of move away into a different level of understanding. And when you think about the idea that our DNA was manipulated in some places, some people talk about it was manipulated on purpose to worship, and that literally there is a code written into us, to worship, and that was to essentially serve the people that came here and enslaved us, thousands of years ago. And the idea with that is that, the understanding of accountability and individual accountability, it's almost like we're naturally up against that within our DNA, because we've been hardwired to worship, religions. We've been hardwired to turn over our moralities to religions and concepts of sin. I cannot be a moral compass of my own. Therefore, I must, invest and trust myself into this outside entity to be my own morality and follow these rules. It's the same with governments, and the same with education. I to be left to my own self and my own actions, humanity would devour itself or humanity would destroy itself. So we must turn over our accountability to these governing factions. Essentially, my understanding is that's written into our DNA. And I know we are collectively changing this DNA on a level, and it can be changed, but it ties into that kind of that feedback loop that we're going into between the higher self and then into the false ego, the higher self and into the false ego, back and forth, back and forth. So where, I guess my question based off of those concepts is, do you feel like we are actively rewriting that DNA, those blocks that have kind of, written it into our cellular structure, that we turn over our accountability? Can we rewrite that together as a collective, and is that happening right now?
Yeah, I think we're doing it now. People have been doing it over time, one by one, if you will, or maybe in small groups. And this is the time where people are going to finally do it all together. Maybe that's a double-edged sword, and this is the time where we're, not that basically people are going to do it all together. That's the word, that's the rumor, if you will. But the main idea is that people aren't going to repeat this cycle again. It's not, we're done with that loop.
Good.
And but maybe that means that the people that aren't going to do it this time around are going to go somewhere else or something like that.
And keep doing it, right? Until they get it. Is that the idea?
Or completely, come to terms with what they want to be and want to exist in, and move in a different world, in a different direction. I'm not sure.
Yeah.
Sure. But the idea is that we, just like a waveform, we do go up and down between the higher self and the false ego. But I'm pretty sure the idea is that there's always a time where then we shift higher, and it's again, everything probably cycles. I don't think anything really. Something could happen years, and then humans exist forever. That's impossible for us to comprehend. But that, just like a waveform, we do go up and down between the higher self and the false ego. But I'm pretty sure the idea is that there's always a time where then we shift higher, and it's again, everything probably cycles. I don't think anything really happens again twice, which is the magic of it. It's infinite, but yet nothing has to happen again twice, that's impossible for us to comprehend. But that translates, and this is why it's hard to comprehend, that something could happen in a few years, and then humans exist forever. beyond that. That doesn't make sense. It doesn't make logical sense to us. Even if it was like 2 million years after, beyond the next however many years it's gonna play out over, that would be inconceivable to us because we've advanced this far in a short amount of time. At that point we could become non-physical, if you will, and then what? So time itself, what it's coming down to is time itself is becoming no longer relevant. And I think that's because we've been bouncing up and down for a very long time, and every time it goes up and down, the memory gets wiped, and we come back each time reaching that fulcrum of awareness and on a collective level. And if we don't reach it, it's we go back down and get wiped, and it's as if every time it's the first time we've seen it before. Whereas after that point, if we get past it, we don't ever have to do that again, because we don't have to do anything twice, to the degree where then it would be considered that we're forever beyond the bounds of lower consciousness and materialistic mind, and honestly maybe death entirely. Because if we achieve a level of understanding where we can literally balance our energies with the energy of the universe and what's on the plane and the earth, the earth, whether it's bacteria and virus or just simple toxins and stuff, and we can clean everything up, well, we would extend our lives to a very high degree. What if eventually as society we figured out how to go beyond that, So I think that it actually plays into, and if it's not that, well, they have not artificial, but they have technological ways of doing that where they don't have to die anymore. Now, whether that's refined fully and truly serves a purpose will probably be determined here shortly, but I've seen it, up close and the bounds of lower consciousness and materialistic mind, and honestly maybe death entirely. Because if we achieve a level of understanding where we can literally balance our energies with the energy of the universe and what's on the plane and the earth, the earth, whether it's bacteria and virus or just simple toxins and stuff, and we can clean everything up, well, we would extend our lives to a very high degree. What if eventually as society we figured out how to go beyond that, So I think that it actually plays into, and if it's not that, well, they have not artificial, but they have technological ways of doing that where they don't have to die anymore. Now, whether that's refined fully and truly serves a purpose will probably be determined here shortly, but I've seen it, up close and and then into extraterrestrial contact, and whether they're walking around, entities, or whether they're more spiritual or even angelic or demonic, and coming together of all.
To kind of take a moment to talk about the celebrity cloning, and I just want to kind of bring the dialogue back to that
and that does tie into why this is all happening, and how a lot of people say it's a test to see who really wants to make it to eternity. And it gets really weird.
So where, I guess my question based off of those concepts is, do you feel like we are actively rewriting that DNA, those blocks that have kind of, written it into our cellular structure, that we turn over our accountability? Can we rewrite that together as a collective? And is that happening right now?
Yeah, I think we're doing it now. People have been doing it over time, one by one, if you will, or maybe in small groups. And this is the time where people are going to finally do it all together. Maybe that's a double-edged sword. And this is the time where we're, not that... Basically, people are going to do it all together. That's the word. That's the rumor, if you will. But the main idea is that people aren't going to repeat this cycle again. It's not, we're done with that loop.
Good.
And but maybe that means that the people that aren't going to do it this time around are going to go somewhere else or something like that.
And keep doing it, right? Until they get it. Is that the idea?
Or completely, come to terms with what they want to be and want to exist in, and move in a different world, in a different direction. I'm not sure.
Yeah.
But the idea is that we, just like a waveform, we do go up and down between the higher self and the false ego. But I'm pretty sure the idea is that there's always a time where then we shift higher, and it's again everything probably cycles. I don't think anything really happens again twice, which is the magic of it. It's infinite, but yet nothing has to happen again twice, that's impossible for us to comprehend. But that translates, and this is why it's hard to comprehend, that something could happen in a few years and then humans exist forever beyond that. That doesn't make sense. It doesn't make logical sense to us. Even if it was like 2 million years after, beyond the next however many years it's gonna play out over, that would be inconceivable to us because we've advanced this far in a short amount of time. At that point we could become non-physical, if you will, and then what? So time itself, what it's coming down to is time itself is becoming no longer relevant. And I think that's because we've been bouncing up and down for a very long time, and every time it goes up and down, the memory gets wiped, and we come back each time reaching that fulcrum of awareness on a collective level. And if we don't reach it, we go back down and get wiped, and it's as if every time it's the first time we've seen it before. Whereas after that point, if we get past it, we don't ever have to do that again, because we don't have to do anything twice, to the degree where then it would be considered that we're forever beyond the bounds of lower consciousness and materialistic mind, and honestly maybe death entirely. Because if we achieve a level of understanding where we can literally balance our energies with the energy of the universe and what's on the plane and the earth, the earth, whether it's bacteria and virus or just simple toxins and stuff, and we can clean everything up, well, we would extend our lives to a very high degree. But if eventually as society we figured out how to go beyond that, so I think that it actually plays into, and if it's not that, well, they have not artificial, but they have technological ways of doing that where they don't have to die anymore. Now, whether that's refined fully and truly serves a purpose will probably be determined here shortly, but I've seen it, up close and intimate, and so I know they've been doing many, many things like that. And that does tie into why this is all happening, and how a lot of people say it's a test to see who really wants to make it to eternity. And it gets really weird to the degree where it's like we were always in eternity, and now's the time where we kind of took a step back to live in this difficult world situation, so that when we all come back to eternity, we know more about who did what in this type of not cataclysmic, but this very difficult catalyzing world, where then we know what type of person or eternal being each one of us is.
And so when you talk about the ideas of timelessness and time being kind of a mute point, and the paradox of basically all of existence has already happened, and it's happening now, and it's happening over and over. It's this infinite thing that's happening. The way that we view time on a linear level, if that didn't exist, and the understanding was grounded into all of us that, we are existing, every single moment is existing in the entirety of all moments. And with that understanding comes the breakdown of the fear of death, and comes the breakdown of, where do we go from here? And essentially the accountability of the generations and the timeline, the lineages that, will pass on through reincarnation, through continuing to do this work through refinement and evolution. When you're faced into an existence and an understanding, and you've locked yourself into the thinking that this is my one life here, once I die, this is it. The fear of death, the fragility of letting go here is so huge that it locks you into kind of, stepping on eggshells through life and not taking, chances, not wanting to expand your consciousness outside the bubble, because you're just trying to be safe and comfortable, to just exist in this tiny little bubble of an experience. But when you start breaking down that conditioning and start really kind of opening yourself up to the paradoxes of timelessness and those things, you really can understand where this life, echoes into the infinite kind of education and evolution of all consciousness. And so that helps and assists with the understanding of day-to-day stuff, and breaking out of this conditioning here, and breaking out of this construct, because then you're able to see that generations it may take. It may take many lifetimes. It may take, multiple reincarnations to kind of get through and break this stuff down and move and evolve. But that is all part of this. That is all part of this living, breathing experience that we are all tied and connected to.
Yeah, and it is basically about the larger evolution, the larger picture that's going on. That's, so much has been happening that we're not aware of when we just kind of worry about certain things as people. And then it does come down to the false identity. Basically, it's there to be broken down and to be broken free from by the true identity. And even if it's not, reincarnative type of existence and more of a simultaneous awareness happening at once type of thing, outside, what it means is that outside the physical body, we still exist, if not in a more free and, spiritually connected form, to the degree where we don't have like half knowledge like the brain can comprehend at once, because it has to focus on parts of specific things and like build an image of what it thinks it is, where we can actually see it then in some type of etheric quality. And so and then all that creates that feed. Well, it's almost as if they could put out news reports tomorrow saying time doesn't actually exist, and within like 5 years of those, people would begin living like 500 years at a time. Like, it would just naturally play out based upon our identities at that point, because then we're focusing on what we could be outside of this or what could be next, and as well we're focusing on what we really are here. And that's how it's kind of like a puppet show. They're just getting us to look around at one hand or the other, when in reality the whole thing is telling us what it is. The set, the guy behind it with his hands up, puppets sitting there, the whole thing is telling us we're in a holographic reality where our higher self, which is eternal, is playing out these almost simulation like experiences. So it's like a dream within a simulator or a matrix reality. And we're actually in the simulator, which was invented, and it's this construct. Naturally, we're just dreaming existences, and we basically bounce around realms, so once the simulator's gone, we'll be dreaming again.
Gotcha.
If we stay in a simulator, then there's no more dreaming.
And with the simulator, does that have to kind of get rid of that simulation there, does that have to do with breaking through the 9 veils?
Apparently, when these experiments that went on took place, and they say we were the Atlanteans, the first race, that's why we have this power. We're in contact with the Nordics, which might just be clones and deception and stuff. They make it look like them or their ancestors started the first generators, which are placed around the world, and left a bunch of artifacts, and the beginning experiments of this whole mind control MKUltra thing began time in this dimension for humanity. Humanity was here, but it's like we weren't fracted away in this alternate dimension.
Yeah.
Which then equates to that we can break free from that system, and in that sense, we don't have to break through dimensional barriers with CERN. We're actually letting go of this construct, and it's like, that's the work that has to be done, and that's also the most difficult thing people can do.
Yeah, definitely. All right, so to kind of slingshot back before I go into this next question here, you wanted to kind of take a moment to talk about the celebrity cloning, and I just want to kind of bring the dialogue back to that, and I'll give a summary of what I understand, and just for the sake of the listener here, is essentially there are underground bases and whatnot all around where they are pulling people's consciousness out of their bodies during REM sleep, and they're projecting this consciousness into clone bodies, and these clone bodies are then used to serve a multitude of different things for the occult and for the Illuminati, and sexual things and control things, and even like pets into a certain extent. And these celebrities have kind of given their consent and contracts to this relationship that's happening, but not so much in the clear way that they've kind of been duped, but not really been duped. It's one of those things that goes down to consent and the way that we're manipulated into it to a certain part of that, and that right now there is this awareness and awakening within the kind of Hollywood echelon and the higher echelon for celebrities that this is happening, and wanting to get some help and wanting to kind of put that out there. And one of the questions that people had recently for me when I was doing another interview about the FDN movement, is that, what celebrities can we get behind us? And my response was, well, I don't really kind of want to go and look for celebrities because they're the people that need the help the most. They're the people that are going to be coming to a movement like this asking for help. And so is there any kind of, is there anything you want to say about that in general to kind of support their cause right now, their reach out for help? How can we do that as a community, support them? And is there any type of knowledge that you'd like to kind of get out to people right now about the cloning facilities and that experience?
I'll just summary up what kind of you said. So yeah, there are underground bases, and they use the REM sleep transfer, and they perform experimentation for occult purposes, down to pleasure and pay-to-play purposes like that, and then even into spiritual experiments with psychology and religious experimentation on the brain and mind. As far as the agreements, it's like an unconscionable agreement where the person was not in the right mind to be able to understand what they were getting into, and not even understand it, but understand that they were making an agreement, or manufactured consent or agreements into consent without awareness, or non-willing consent, or even non-consenting experimentation where people don't realize it. And it goes back into how we're kind of consenting with every action we make, that basically what we do to the world and others is painting a picture for what we're allowing to ourselves in our realm. Imagine we're a realm being living in a realm, but whatever you have in your realm, whatever objects of whatever energies that you create. Okay, so you have a certain type of whatever over here, I don't know, red ball sitting on a brown box, and say that's, smoking cigarettes or hurting the body or whatever it is, and some other guy just puts a bunch of those objects right over there. You technically can't say on the basis, it's almost like a protection system, because you can't say on the basis that he did that, he was wrong, because he could then play off and say, well, I thought you liked that. I just bought you 10 of them. I gave you a gift. Now you owe me $5. Then the person might be, dumb enough to agree with that. Yeah. But, and so that's kind of how it happens. And it's kind of narcissistic in a way, where they might be in the wrong, but they know if they can get enough energy from that person will fold and basically follow them energetically and allow what they're doing. They'll succumb and become submissive to that. And all it is a control system, like a bully, where they're tricking people into doing things like that, or accepting pain against them based upon their ignorance and their unawareness of the law. And other people are using that as a type of false matrix system where suffering and sacrifice is being sold to us as spiritual advancement. And so then there is a celebrity cloning situation. And I like what you said about the individuals. I've personally had contact with all of the celebrities that you know. Everyone that's listening to this, and then all the little whoever's watching whatever and listening to this that aren't probably going to listen to this, I've seen all that they've seen too. And you know what that means, because people that are worshiping celebrities know of like hundreds of celebrities that like better than their family. So I've seen them all. They'll get involved on their own. It's very complicated with that. Some of them are basically from another time. That's kind of how it works. So if you could imagine, it's not like they're going through something that's bigger than this. It's just that they're in a situation where it's like a dam that's going to break. And once it starts to break, more than just water is coming out, basically. There's going to be like boats full of stuff that we didn't think existed coming out, or maybe I should say ships.
Can you expand on that really quick? Can you go deeper into that thought? Tell me more about that.
Well, there are some people that are basically reincarnated through the soul stone technology. Apparently that doesn't work with everybody. A lot of people basically, with this brain chip, which most people involved with this will have, it feeds into a very powerful system that actually communicates forwards and backwards in time. And also there's infection systems that friggin' got the same power, basically, the same capability. So we're dealing with almost like, crazy Terminator situations. And apparently it's all managed now. It's all handled. We're in a good situation to the degree where even if, the most shocking of events come about, the core of the human species will survive, and it will all just add up to being that's what strengthened the human species to survive to the degree it did. It's all it's worked into time, into itself, to the point where it's going to be intense, but it's only going to be which makes us who we are. it's kind of like how it is anyway, but people are, on the edge. And so that with that happening, a lot of people are transferred basically from another time, and some from the far past and some from the far future. And so they're bringing, and that's what Egypt was for. Egypt was for a lot of generators to turn on and then bringing the entire city into the future. You get it? Or wherever else it's going to go into another dimension. And so that's basically what's happening now, and it's happening slowly. And then if a cosmic event occurs or these generators get turned on full power, well, we might find all of us in one big CERN machine. And then at that point, we go to wherever we're thinking, wherever it's being guided. And but regardless of that, which is all connected, because in these situations, the people gain awareness through this system, because it's almost like the internet. If you can search it, if you can spell it, well, you're going to get information about it. Well, that's kind of what it is with this. If you can stop doing something else, calm down, think about it, and go into information mode, you'll start to pull information from genetic memory. And if a person is involved in this system, they'll have either the brain chip or some type of interlink to this information, whether it's through DNA or otherwise. And so a lot of people in the cloning situations in the bases know a lot more than just the cloning system as like the thing that has to come out. Honestly, it's so much far beyond that's pretty much why they're unable to talk about anything, because there's no real access point. It would just look like they're snapping and going crazy,
which happens, and this is what we witness within the the mainstream media, is when we see celebrities snap, this is what's going on, right?
For the most part, yes. Yeah. Even down into early times where it's just MK Ultra programming. Totally. So that's basically what's happening. And then we don't really want to go up there and get a group of 10 of them that are just going to be stressed to hell. Yeah. Although eventually that's what it is. Once there's a group that's out saying, this is what it is, this is what's happening, then they're in public eye as basically completely coming out. And it's all about everybody working together.
Definitely.
It's a tough situation, because it's one, no one would know how to talk about it, and two, it's basically dangerous for those that could accidentally disrupt one part of the project or another without basically if you can benefit humanity, that protects you and that flies. If we're just trying to break down doors and throw all the files out on the streets so people can find out, it's not going to end as well as it would if it was a controlled process.
I understand.
So then some faction going, well, look, this person is going to speak out here, they're doing this, and the result is that now we have a riot over here, and they don't even know what they're talking about. They're thinking about this, when in reality, this is a real problem, and we're trying to get this to come out anyway.
Yeah.
So everybody, and then on top of that, it's need to know basis, and nobody knows what's going on. Nobody knows where anybody's at, and who really feels what. And so that's how complicated it is.
And so really quick, essentially the idea is that, this information is tied to so many different programs and the construct of our kind of forward-moving reality that, as you say, if we were to just kind of throw all the files out in the street and everybody to know, that potentially the outcome of that would not be so positive, potentially, and that there's a softer, more graceful way. And when I kind of heard that, what I saw was the metaphor of healing in general. When you look at somebody that's been through a lot of trauma and PTSD, you don't want to necessarily just throw all that information out there to them about what they've been through, because it reinforces that trauma and it puts them there. And the healing process is a gentle, gracefully guided process between the person and between the healer. And so within this same way, as society and the people that are educated about this stuff right now, the process of supporting these people kind of coming out needs to be looked at as the same. We are essentially healing together this wound or whatever, this distortion that's being played out right now, and how we do that needs to be taken with grace and care within that healing process in order to maximize the positive effect of that information coming out.
Right. I like how you put it, because it is one big healing process for the world. It is like the world's in trauma, and it has to be done the same way that people were put to sleep. They didn't come with big drone devices, and like beamed everybody in the city so we could obviously see what was happening.
Yeah.
It was slow and gradual over time. Definitely. In the same sense, if we came a big wakeful, huge speaker systems that put out tone that broke apart trauma, which is what, that it's the same thing. You put people to sleep, you wake people up. That technology exists.
Yeah.
I saw it. I went through that technology. They called it the Golden Triangle, and it was basically a craft from they called it another race, a higher race. They gave a specific name, but I'm not going into any secret space program stuff because I'm basically waiting for more people to talk out. And it's kind of weird because there's a lot of people talking out. There's like the height of the secret space program unveiling, but I'm pretty sure it's going to get a lot more interesting. They even said there was going to be sightings and they're going to start showing off the craft. But it was as painful as the trauma beginning I literally felt like a little kid going through all the trauma again, but I could witness that that's what I went through, and that's why I felt certain things and I felt a certain way. It was ingrained in my mind and the brain and the programming device in my brain. And so this device guided by entities basically, or just like fucking a factions technician, I don't know. Mm-hmm. It vibrated that energy, and it was the opposite of the sleep command that we get all around. But that was extremely I was literally like lifted off the ground.
Yeah.
So it's intense.
Yeah, for sure.
And of course, it's a gravitic, inertialess bubble that I was in. I wasn't like get hit by lightning or something, but it's high technology and it's powerful. It was like getting struck by lightning that was waking everything up. And so what we could say is that we probably want to do it a little bit faster than the hypnotist put someone to sleep, but you don't want to just like clap your hands real loud and then have everybody awake. It's got to be almost in a sacred geometrical pattern as it spreads through people. And in the end, and maybe not the end, but maybe the beginning, what we see is that that's how waking up happens in the first place. That's how it does work. If it is through some artificial means where it's like a binary 1-2 process, and then 1-2, 1-2, instead of 1-2 to 3 to 5 to 8 to 12, it's artificial. It's going to die out. It's like the games where you have to make the wave last the longest. And when it does happen naturally, then that's what can't be stopped. And they kind of also say that's why they're building up to this, because when it does happen, it can't be stopped. Nobody can stop it. We're just in the portion where it's not really jumped off yet, but because they're using such high technology, people are aware of where all this is going before almost they're supposed to. Like, we've been bumped ahead in technology, as a result, we're basically trying to stop getting ahead of ourselves as a result of them being so far ahead of us, when in reality, we're just coming up to where we should be now. Yeah. So it's almost like a nightmare that didn't exist.
And so to kind of bring things back to the cloning part of that dialogue, is there a place that you feel like humanity right now could assist in starting that healing process? I essentially understand that it's already started, but I mean, where can we kind of serve that healing process right now? Where can we serve these people that are actively looking to kind of bring this information out and also essentially get out of the situations that they're in?
It's very strange. I kind of got this inspiration from another talk where at the end of the talk I was like, and I think everybody should focus on self-awareness and connect with each other and start the same pattern, blah blah. And that's really an illusion, because what we did to get to that point where we had that talk and we're having a talk like this now is that we came to self-awareness through the myriad of ways that we live life. And it wasn't that we did one thing or another differently. It was that we most likely stopped doing certain things that were taking our attention. And then in the pause between that, the reprieve of having our attention stolen from us or handing it away, we gained more self-awareness. And from that, there's this pivotal perspective shift that allows us, it may be just a perception of control and free will, which maybe that perception of control and free will is control and free will, regardless if it's an illusion or not. And so it's not really so much an action, although that does go along with meaning, what we're doing here is good. People could write their ideas and get them out on, videos and communicate to each other and everything in regards to that. But it's all about self-awareness, which kind of comes down to not acting and basically inaction, and in that way not forcing the change as if it's a change that we can have anything to do with other than delaying it. And then we realize that it's really not that people aren't doing too much in this situation is that people are doing too much in the wrong way, with the wrong attitude, in the wrong system. So it's really that we need to withdraw from that. Now that's a big, complex, labyrinth of interaction and interoperability and how stuff is going to work and accountability. In reality, maybe not reality, maybe dream time. Maybe it's more like this. Maybe, how do you wake up from a dream, a nightmare that you don't want to be in? Is it really that you do a bunch of things differently? You could, because you could say, well, when something scary is happening, laugh or make a joke or flip the lights on or something like that. But the main thing is that when there's a moment of fear or something trying to create that response, you cut that response off and you don't give into it, and you can watch it fade away at that point. Because then at that point, we don't really have to wake up for the dream. So it's maybe that we don't have to create change here, but we have to, or not create change here, but not that we have to change a system with our actions. We need to create what we want to see, and that will slowly overgrow the system that we see now that's not sustainable anymore. And in that comes the real, only true, maybe other than that dream metaphor I gave, only true advice, which is that we need to find what it is that we want to see, what it is that we want, what kind of world do we want to live in if we're creating it and we're not living off of trends and fads and, popular opinion, and basically all that stuff is controlled and it's picked for us. None of that is what popular cultural opinion is. None of that is what people want. It doesn't have anything to do with the individual understanding themselves. And so in the end, and I keep saying in the end, it's not the end, it's a good way to wrap it up, but finding who we really are in this individual way is like humanity breaking off of that cultural hive mind where everything, the self, the identity of the self is decided for us. Now that can go, in different directions. It's omnidirectional. We can go from this binary, I'm cultural versus I'm something else point of view to, transcending that shift in the middle above it and going in any direction from there, wherever we want to put that, which could be, now there's this neo culture and no one really knows who they are. And it's all, cartoons and pop culture that they're connected to, or political BS. But in reality, that shouldn't overthrow the whole picture. It shouldn't change the fact that this is essentially a natural evolution of spirit and identity that honestly it falls into that nightmare situation where we don't need to destroy people doing that. We need to secure ourselves in who we are, which would be the alternative would be that, well, you can keep your culture. It doesn't mean you have to give everything up. It just means that you have to actually find yourself within that. And that's basically what's happening and what we're doing. And that comes down into everything, down to almost a charge and a battery. It comes down to the physical, the ground level, the ones and O's and